Hello everyone! Welcome back to this game. When we last left off, I was reading up on some lore that I acquired. So let's see here. First things first, I want to reiterate something real quick. I don't mind I don't mind reading all this. I like reading all this information, it's kind of neat. It was just a little bit, oh, what is the word? Not foreboding. The word that makes me nervous about doing a thing. Whatever. It was towards the end of the stream and my voice was worn out and it's like, oh gosh, walls of text. But it's a new stream. I'm ready to read on. Denizens of Hell. Let's see what we got here. For a long time, people believed that hell was created by gods to throw the souls of unrepentant sinners into its burning bowels. Its place of eternal exile and suffering for those who were so much guilty after one or several lives that gods decided to throw their ruined souls out of the great cycle, leaving them no chance for a new rebirth. This ancient myth is still well known today, and we must admit that the Church of Light is in no hurry to eradicate it. The threat of eternal torment helps to keep the faithful from committing sins. However, educated people have long known most of stories about hell are fiction. Ironically, the church bishops were the first to realize this because in the past, monasteries and churches were the main, or even the only, centers of education. Hell, like our world, was indeed created by gods, but they did not had in mind the idea of creating a place of eternal punishment for the unrepented ones. It is possible to exclude the soul from the cycle of rebirth only by using necromancy to lock it in a dead body. Falling into hell, frankly speaking, is also impossible because it simply does not lie underground. Hell is a completely different world, or rather another planet. Presumably it revolves around our sun, but is located much closer to it than our home Yalm is. Well, that's kind of an interesting theory right there. So, imagine if Mercury was hell, basically. Or Venus, even. Also, this planet is apparently called Yalm. I don't know if that's information I'm going to want to keep in mind, but we'll go with that. Let me write it down. Okay, the aboriginal inhabitants of the planet are apparently imps. There are different points of view about the nature of the imps, demons, and succubae. I see Bay, and I think Bay. However, there is no doubt that their homeland is Yalm. Despite having horns, sharp claws, and tails, their resemblance to humans, dwarves, elves, and other intelligent races is obvious. Some scientists believe that imps are the descendants of overgrown species of unholy creatures created in ancient times by the evil god of darkness, Abaddon. Abaddon is certainly getting around in this story. He also moved to hell with his subjects. This theory is confirmed by the fact that demons are vulnerable to water, the opposite of fire, and, like the unholy ones, to light, while imps are only afraid of water because their native hell has strong connection to the fire element. However, demons do not worship any gods and forbid their slaves to do so. It is believed that demons are one of the ancient races, along with elves and lizard folk. They escaped to hell at the dawn of history, refusing the dominance of gods. The rebellious race became resistant to fire after escaping to hell, becoming weak to light element for betraying gods. One way or another, but with the exception of imps, all hell denizens are vulnerable to light and water, and resistant to darkness and fire. I'm kinda curious about the story of how they managed to get to hell in the first place. I mean, sure, teleportation and portals is a thing, but how did they happen to discover it? Imps, as written above... Hold on. Let me double check that's where I am. Yeah. Imps, as written above, are resistant to fire and vulnerable to water. As far as we know, they don't have other elemental aptitudes or weaknesses. Being the most despicable and oppressed denizens of hell, imps do not value their own or others' lives. As a rule, they do not care about protecting themselves. Tall imp warriors immediately rush into battle as if wishing for death. They don't try to cover themselves or their allies. Imps brigands, playing the role of scouts in hell, are waiting for the moment to backstab the enemy. The cleverest are taught to cast magic. Rather, the simplest fire magic spells are beaten into their heads with a whip. That is a rough school to go to, apparently. They also know how to cast silence to fight enemy mages. An experience's mage should be ashamed to die because of an imp spell, but it is still possible. Nothing like a bestiary that makes somebody feel shameful. You should feel embarrassed if you die from an imp. Dangerous pests. Giant rats, winged bats, and poisonous slimes, the latter are often called frog cyclopses in Rhodonia because of their bizarre appearance, have been known to people since times immemorial. Complaints about dangerous pests that attack livestock and even penetrate securely locked vaults are found in ancient chronicles, along with religious sermons and stories about the heroic deeds of legendary heroes. Citizens often joke. They say that gods created rats and slime only so that the recruiters of the great guilds, warriors, thieves, mages, and others, would always have the opportunity to practice and earn a piece of bread and a room in a cheap tavern. That is a bum life. Of course, all this is just a joke. Wise priests always remind us, all creatures living under the sky are the result of the divine design. What, even monsters? Because it's kind of been implied that monsters are kind of mindless and evil. But maybe that's just people not understanding creatures. Okay, this time for real I lost my place. Where was I? Oh. If gods of darkness created pests, then we should pray to light for salvation. If the Light Lords are behind the creation of monsters, then this is the price for our sins, which should be accepted with humility. That's also kind of a bummer, actually. No, I don't accept it with humility. I say that's kind of a bum rap, even if I'm a good person, that I should suffer the same as all the really not so good people. However, there is a grain of truth in every joke. Indeed, dozens and dozens of generations of young adventurers mastered their skills fighting giant rats in the cellars, cleaning up sores from poisonous slimes, and protecting livestock from bats. Every year, guards, soldiers, and guilds rookies destroy thousands of pests with nary an end in sight. The parasites are definitely not afraid of extinction. Garbage dumps, sewers, and other creature comforts create breeding grounds for pests. Alchemists' attempts to destroy giant rats with poisoned feeders didn't result in success. Alas, no race has invented a more effective way to kill the pests than with a sword or a fireball. Fortunately for all new adventurers. The following pests are common in the near vicinity of Swifton. Rats. The most dangerous are brown and gray. Rat bites leave lacerated wounds on the body, which often result in severe bleeding. Brown rats are more robust and more resilient than the gray ones. They can survive one blow with the sword, especially if the sword is in the hand of an inexperienced warrior. However, wise veterans and guild instructors still strongly recommend to recruits to destroy the gray rats first. These creatures lie waiting, preparing to attack, but when they attack, they bite like mad as if under the haste spell. Frog cyclopses. The most dangerous are blue and pink. Being a slime, a special form of life, all frog cyclopses are resistant to poison, bleeding, and any injuries, because their bodies have neither muscles nor bones. In turn, the slime are very toxic, and the poison of different species has a different effect. The blue frog cyclopses spray poison at one target, while a pink frog cyclops releases a cloud of deadly spray, poisoning all enemies nearby. Bats. Because every RPG needs bats. The main danger of these winged bloodsuckers is in their number. Bats live in flocks and always hunt in groups of at least 5 bats. Choosing a victim, bats attack it together, making quick and sharp attacks on unprotected places. Bats' teeth and claws cause severe bleeding. That's like a super bleeding, it looks like, if it has a different icon. It is not unusual for an experienced warrior defeat a group of bats, but die from blood loss if was no healing potion at hand. And lastly, elementals. Our world came into being in a place where 6 different elements united: water, earth, air, fire, darkness, and of course light, whose power didn't only breathe life into our bodies, but also granted our souls immortality. Thank you, light. I appreciate that. The interaction between the elements is the basis of any movement, and even darkness that brings decay and death has its design in the great balance. At the same time, each element is self-sufficient and forms its own unique plane. There live almighty gods always watching us. For their personal convenience, the gods created humble and silent servants, elementals. These creatures are much like golems, or I should say, golems are much like elementals. Okay, person who is saying this in the first person, who are you? Who wrote this? Lacking personality, emotions, and desires, the servants of the gods are like smart and efficient mechanisms. Yes, they are smart, but not sentient. The only exception is those who were blessed with human features by gods. These creatures are traditionally called spirits. Such is Priest's vision on the nature of elementals. Mages have a different opinion. They believe that life which exists in planes has never been and will never be static and unchanged, and the elements are the result of evolution, which went a different way comparing to our world. The mages also insist that gods are not creators, but only the most developed and progressive representatives of their planes. This theory certainly seems quite curious, but at the same time completely unbelievable and even radical for any intelligent creatures, except for the mages themselves, whose sentience is also subject to constant doubt. Oh, that is a burn. If the universe was not created by the gods, then who did it? Mages cannot give an intelligible answer to this reasonable question, except for, it all just happened to be, which, of course, is below any criticism. I'm kind of on that same page. I like to think that it didn't just simply happen. However, we should mention that with the exception of this nonsense, the representatives of the Mages Guild know best about elementals' characteristics and qualities. Although all elementals belong to different planes, they all have a number of common features. It is impossible to enchant or scare the instruments of the gods. Makes sense. They're not sentient, supposedly, so they don't necessarily think much. You can't really scare something that is lacking emotion. They simply do not know such feelings. All elementals are immune to poison, bleeding, and injuries. These are really strong fighters, which even experienced warriors should avoid. This is not always possible, however. You got that right. Elementals come into our world now and then. This usually happens when mages summon elemental creatures without unbeknownst to gods. When fighting an elemental, one should use magic or weapons of the opposite element. That makes sense. I suppose if there's any enemy that would be easy to figure out its weakness, It be elementals. Light opposes darkness, fire opposes water, and earth opposes air. Those last two are going to be what I'm going to really want to keep in mind, because it's not exactly obvious what is weak against what. So I might have to, well, I say use process of elimination in order to figure out the weaknesses of the only two things that are not obvious. But, I'm just going to go ahead and write this down. That is a mistake I made in Arc Aerith, was not writing the weaknesses down. Lucky is the On who can quickly understand the nature of an elemental. The lesser creatures of earth, fire, air, water, darkness, and light are easy to tell. It's a mystery, but for some reason near Swifton there are more earth elementals, which, for reasons unknown, are almost always aggressive towards people and animals. They probably are aware of people potential at polluting the earth. However, sometimes there exist more complex and strange creatures, which we can designate as elementals. People have different names for them: spirits of madness, spirits of hatred, etc. Determining the nature of these creatures can be difficult, but it is possible. You should rely on reason, logic, and expand your horizons by reading smart books. The spirits of hatred are obviously associated with the most evil and terrible of darkness gods, the Tormentor Abaddon, and therefore are vulnerable to light. And that is it for the bestiary stuff. So after having read those, do I get a prize? Do I, for some reason, have to make sure that I read all the way down to the bottom where it doesn't scroll anymore? Because I didn't necessarily do that my first time through these. Nope. I'm definitely curious what it is that we have to do in order to read and understand these bestiaries. Maybe it is a situation where I just have to make sure to go out and kill every enemy. I'm gonna assume not, though, because there's nothing to actually keep track of that. Okay, just real quick. I don't know if I got it yet, but there's an item in the sewers that I missed, apparently. It's in there. I got a rope. And that takes care of that. From here, I'm gonna go ahead and head back to Roadside and do some gambling at the arena. Nice that I'm able to just walk out of Swifton now. It was expensive, it was ridiculous, but it's worth it.